Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Asch. Today, we are going up to Suisun City in Solano County with the relatively new city manager, Brett Perluba. Brett and I first met when he was back in Clayton in central Contra Costa County. We're going to talk today about what inspired him to head a little bit further north and east. And we're going to learn about his vision and the elected council's vision for this city that is rapidly transforming from an old sea town. Brett, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, really glad to be here. Can't wait to have the conversation with you.
Tell us a little bit about your background and your journey.
My beginnings in government slightly different than many in that while I was going to school at night at 18, 19, 20, 21, I was a head golf professional at Maryland Golf Club and ran a retail golf shop in Benicia of my own. And so I had a very entrepreneurial spirit since a young age. And while most are out enjoying the normal college experience, we'll call it, I was already understanding customers, the public in my world now today, employees, culture, all the things that have to happen to try to make things successful. And did that for 7 years. And then knew after I got my master's degree that I wanted to get into government. I wanted to change the way government behaves to improve its ability to serve its community members, but not operate government like a business. You hear that cliche a lot. And frankly, I don't like it because some of the services that we provide as government are to our most vulnerable populations, and they're inherently inefficient because of that. You can't treat it like a business because a business would say, cut those out. They're not ROI generating. That's not our world in government service delivery. That took me to Napa County, where I experienced 10 great years there, going from positions of analyst to administrative director for their corrections department during public safety realignment, which was amazing, and got to explore a lot of great things, managing a $600 million portfolio as the assistant treasurer tax collector, pivoted into the city of Napa, where city government, my career there started, finance and IT director, jumped to Benicia as the assistant city manager, and enjoyed a great experience. I was born and raised in Vallejo, but spent a lot of time in Benicia. My family has resided there for a decade with my wife and daughter, and so it was my home, but really had this desire to lead from day one, lead a city or a county into a new way of doing it. Moved over to Clayton, where it was a great education for me as a city manager. I think there I probably learned some of the greatest lessons, which is really about the speed in which you can do change in a community. And that really taught me a lot. And I think why I took that to Suisun and why Suisun became the place is a couple reasons. Suisun and Benicia, from a geographical sense, are almost identical. Not very large cities, 30,000 resident populations, marinas. The only difference is Benicia has evolved over the last 10 to 15 years from an economic development standpoint, where Suisun has reached this kind of stagnation level. When I saw the new council and the mayor and the energy that which they had, I realized that energy matched my energy. And that's what I needed to be able to hit the ground and make change. I, connected really well. And thus in April of 24, landed me here today and started this path for Suisun City.
That's great. Just to make you feel like you weren't the only one in college who was working. I will admit that I went to school from 8 to 10 in the morning. I was in Tallahassee at Florida State and worked at the state legislature from
Nice.
10:15. I rode my bike, had my suit in my backpack, not books, you didn't need books. And a
Love
suit in the
them.
backpack and rode into the Capitol, changed in the men's room, appeared at work, and worked until 5 o'clock. And then there was always legislative events and stuff happening. I went home, did homework, and then went back out again with my friends. I only slept 5 hours a night at the time. Life was different, but it was a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
getting that experience.
You can't match that in any classroom. I tell people it's nothing against education. I'm a big proponent of it, but there's something that those real world experiences you and I are talking about, they're just never a classroom can emulate, right? You have to really be trial by fire in those moments. I think it's what has served me the greatest in my life from a career standpoint was that time of just being in it before I got into government, of really learning all the stuff we've talked about.
Yeah. So you talk about that energy, and I've felt it from some of your council members. What is their vision for change, as you called it?
There's an edge to Sassoon. I think a lot of it starts in the origin story of how this city became what it was. And some of it is not in the best light in the sense of a lot of redlining and things that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Sassoon is a representation of that, almost isolating the city from its surrounding areas through decisions made around freeways and where they were put and how you dealt with lower income housing and where it would sit before today's laws made things more inclusionary. I think Sassoon's history is a direct reflection of that time and that it oppressed the community as a whole for generations that has tried at moments, or especially around the redevelopment areas of the late 90s and early 2000s, of trying when the marina and the original city hall was built and all these things started to happen to try to lift them up and out of that time. We got the foundation started and then it just stopped at that point. I think what you've seen the last 10 or 15 years is that stagnation here. It was really waiting for somebody to kickstart it again. And what I see from the current council is the ability to have that next vision, but then take the actions to do it. Let me give you an example. We are looking at Suisun. When I talk about that edge, Suisun City is much like a New Orleans or a Charleston, where I feel like there needs to be this blend of great family entertainment and things to do, but also can flip to this kind of 21 and over adulting kind of entertainment vibe as well. And there's pockets of the city where this can happen. If you think down where our waterfront is towards our old theater that's not being used right now, we can see that being redeveloped into this entertainment zone. Great restaurants, cool shops, a lot of family events, maybe Thursday through Sunday, ballers pop up right on certain areas of the street, becomes walking only. And maybe we look at an open container zone where we can police it and we can have really good atmosphere for that kind of older adulting kind of entertainment with bands. And you see it in South Lake Tahoe and areas like that, even the city of Napa, where you can have that outdoor, indoor blend of experience, but you're a roving consumer through it. And you don't have to worry about driving and parking constantly in the city. We see that area there, and we can envision as you walk up the waterfront, the parking lots and the areas around the marina where it's just concrete parking areas now, having restaurants, breweries, shops on the first floor with condos above, right? That give residents that want to live that close to it access, but still has this public thoroughfare to enjoy the marina with business activity all the way up to a 34-acre site we own that we see as this blend of potentially partnering with North Bay, maybe put a clinic there that has no medical services here, but this site could have services like a great clinic, workforce housing, market rate housing, 150 to 200,000 square foot of commercial space that is the commercial that as a resident you want to enjoy. And as someone coming in that still has great value to want to go and test those shops with a center, almost like the Veranda and Conquer, with a center with outdoor wine bars and a concert space for 2,000 people to come and look at outdoor concerts when they happen. We basically sandwich from the water to all the way up there, this multitude of family and entertainment zone that can happen. That's the vision we see. And so we've partnered with Cosmont, who is one of the leading economic development firms in the state, to do an economic development strategy and implementation plan that will be done in January. And that is going to show the community what this could look like and what value that brings to the community members, not just in your ability to stay in Suisun City to have these enjoyments, but also that your tax dollars are going to increasingly be driven higher by the fact that these businesses through sales tax, property tax, and TOT will provide more income to the government, which means we can police better. We can have better event services through Parks and Rec. All the things that you see in these other, I'd say, more well-developed funded cities right now, that would offer the benefit to our community members, which increase the property values, which also keeps the taxation levels when it comes to sales tax raises in the future low, right? Because we don't have to always just rely on the backs of the consumers to do that because we have a bigger pot essentially to pull from as a community. I know that vision may seem like 20 years away for some people, but that is not the intent here. So when we talk about speed, the idea is that we look to a master developer or two that has significant financial backing to come and make this happen. And for us, it's really a 10-year plan with a hell of a lot happening in the 5 and 7 years, right? Through that time frame of seeing those things I just mentioned to you be built up. So we're not waiting around forever, and that it's a sprint to that finish line, not just as it comes throughout the years.
Wow, that is a great vision. It reminds me of Florida. Wow, twice I mentioned
Yeah.
my Florida ties,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's Fort Lauderdale actually, at least a while ago, had an open container law where Miami did not. And it attracted different types of people because you can walk in between locations. You can go into the next location
Correct.
with an open
Correct.
container. It was policed on the street and they made sure people were safe and there was plenty of trash
Yes.
cans and it was clean.
Yep.
Actually cleaner than other areas because it was focused. And you could create that with a property business improvement district or something else. You do have to tie in a master developer like Baltimore Harbor. I know that's what finally made them successful. Here's 50 or 100 acres. And I know we're talking a larger scale.
Do what we need you to do here. Yes.
Yeah. Here's the parking and here's all that. And I would say compared to the Veranda and Concord have enough parking. But
Yes. I'm with you on that.
What they did well versus where I think downtown Walnut Creek lacks is entertainment and restaurants in one zone. So you have an escape room and movie theater and shopping and this versus, and that ice rink or the playground for the kids. You don't have all of it all locked into one.
Yeah. You nailed it. What I learned working in Napa is a lot of the residents that live there, their frustration is everything there is tourism driven. They can't even go to normal retail shops to do certain things because it doesn't exist, or the restaurants they want to go to is tourist level restaurants and they can't even enjoy basic functions with their family. So it's how do we blend all that together? I don't want to gentrify current residents or people that have been here a long time that would feel like all of a sudden we're trying to push that out to something new. It's how do we integrate the two together? And I think it very much can happen. You just got to be very intentional when you do that. Bringing the history and those that are here with us along the way is what I keep telling residents and the council. They don't need to be a mutually exclusive conversation.
You mentioned Benicia, which is interesting, and about how they've done a little better at economic development. Why do you think they've done better? And what are some of those examples?
I think they figured out who they are sooner than I think they realized that they wanted to go back to their roots of the 80s, which was much more respect of the arts and the restaurants and the smaller kind of curated shops in their downtown, because that's what the community could support, and less around big box and retail. Not that those aren't important because you need those to survive as a city, but they blended it and got an atmosphere that allowed the One House Bakery is a nationally now known restaurant and bakery there. And she used to be the pastry chef for Bouchon. And she has done an amazing job at One House creating that. If you go to Bella Sienna on the water, that restaurant has done an amazing job of taking an old industrial building and making it this really cool open space restaurant on the water. These are attractions that drive the public, along with new bars and wine bars along First Street, our main drag. It's created an atmosphere that make people want to come downtown and experience a restaurant, a bar, or a small shop, not just antique shops, which is the MO we used to have, but a variety of different shops for a variety of different type of retail experiences, all leading to the very end of a waterfront where they host significant communities and food truck events. It all connects together. And so what Suisun hasn't done here is figured out who we are and then connected it all together, right? And that's what we're trying to do with this vision, is saying, no, this is who we are. We have a little bit of edge to us around art and music, like New Orleans might. How we bring that and foster that culture and environment here and not lose that. Because what I don't want to create is some cookie cutter kind of version of this, right? Because I don't think that'll resonate well with the community members here. And it will be harder to bring people in if it's the same old. I want it to be in the vein we talked about it. Things that you mentioned where it's such a good thing that people police themselves about doing things the right way when you open up these zones for people to experience things differently, including partnering with some of our unbelievable businesses like it. We have It's Here, which is a great attraction for a lot of people. What if we created the Jelly Belly tour experience and redevelop the building for them like that? What a difference it would make for people to want to come in. This is a cool thing. And we have not connected with them enough, in my opinion, as a city to say, how do we help you make some vision like this happen that's a win for everybody involved? And that's the difference in the council today, myself and the department heads. That's how we're thinking about these things. The question isn't, can we do it? The question is, how fast can we get us there together? It's really unique to government because government is usually the slowest turtle in the race. It doesn't mean we forget about important checkpoints or regulations or checking on things. It just means how do we do it more efficiently and effectively so we can actually see these things built in my career lifetime, not the typical 30-year window that like we all get to see. And that's nice that eventually happened. That is not going to help the residents here in Suisun or this region. We've got to break the mold when it comes to that. When I talked about getting into this industry, this is the disruption I meant, finding ways to get things done better, quicker, faster, so communities can benefit from it and it not be the next generation's thing that might happen.
I talk a lot about that from an economic development standpoint because I help consult with a number of PBIDs. How do we do things? This is a great economic plan that has been developed and has a good vision. But what do you have to do to change your zoning to take action, to create flexibility? What are the action items that come out of the plan? I've been in a meeting where I've told somebody, I'm not the guy who's going to create that big binder for you, but I'm the guy that's going to go out there and get the stuff done after you have the big binder and your vision. And that's what I like you talking about. You're looking at action. You're looking at how to make a move and setting a rapid timeline to it. That's a cultural change from a management standpoint. You have to say yes instead of saying, and I've heard that from other cities, like these 3 employees need to retire before we can say yes to these things.
That is a lazy person's approach to trying to get it done, right? By blaming something or process. And it's, okay, how do we lift it up? How do we fix it? How do we adjust? I'm blessed. I think that the majority of my department heads are relatively new to the city. They weren't as concretely into this approach. I think seen me and gone, okay, he might be a little nuts in what he's talking about, but we're with him. One thing I have learned in my 15 years of doing this is I can only go as fast as I can bring the community and the organization with me. In my career, what I used to do is really outpace the organization, and I can drag and pull people for a certain point, but then that only goes so far. It doesn't usually get you to the finish line. What I've learned now is create a very accelerated pace, but one that can bring people with us along the way. I may be slightly ahead of everybody because that's what I need to be as a leader, but I'm not so far that I look back and go, oh crap, I didn't quite get them all the way with me here. I feel like right now we're all pacing pretty good. It's just a lot of this work that I wish would have been done 2 or 3 years ago, economic development plan, looking at how we're doing business. We just have to lift that up. I use the plane in the air analogy. We're flying a plane. We got to fix it and upgrade it while it's still in the air. I cannot let it land right now because that would be the typical pause and take forever government approach. I have to say, department heads and council too, even though they're quick, they've all resonated well to this approach. What I tell the public and the community is if I can't deliver on this in 4 or 5 years, then that's a failure on my part. You need to put someone else that can try to do it. Instead of protecting your career, you have to put expectations out there that you try to reach and see if you can succeed or fail. When we have that mindset and change it up a little bit, much more private sector CEO, yes, there's a lot of inherent risk to doing that personally and professionally, but you're also going to get people to believe that you're really into this and you get it and you're bought into your own plan and you've put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. You're creating an expectation set instead of, and you've seen this elongated reality that like, okay, you're going to have 3 city managers by the time this thing gets to the end and it's going to change 12 times. That's unacceptable to me as a community. Is it trying to change the mold? Absolutely. And from my perspective, all city managers need to go much more in this expectation setting and hard expectation setting of how you get there. And if you don't, then own the reality of why you didn't. We can't hide behind the elongation of government anymore. I think those days need to be long gone, or at least that should be the expectation of the public and councils, that those days are far in the past.
You see that on housing where some cities, despite the state regs, are still making it harder for people to develop. And you see cities that are like, hey, we're going to embrace it, whether it's the housing that fits us or not, we're going to figure this out. You see the community development people react to the city managers, and if not a majority of the council.
Yep.
Some cities are becoming a lot more friendly to do business and to get permits, not just for housing, but for any business.
That's going to rule the day. Those cities are the ones I believe are going to be successful, and the ones that you see are really having the amazing communities and businesses want to come there and people wanting to go there. As a government, much like a business, I use BlackBerry as a perfect example. You can be great at one point, but you stop innovating and you stop moving forward, you will be gone quicker than you think. Now, because of government, it takes a little longer for that to go away. but it's still the same reality. Born and raised in Vallejo, I can tell you, I have seen so many iterations of kind of almost getting close off the jump point of making it happen and then it falling back down. At some point, it becomes very difficult to ever get out of it. It's the self-perpetuating wheel that happens. I applaud everybody trying to do it, but at some point, is it just a road too far because so many decades have gone by with that failure happening? I don't know the answer to that, but it definitely doesn't make it easier as that occurs. I would much rather make a mistake in an action mode than make a mistake because of a passive mode. I think one is much easier to fix and pivot than the other. You see it in so many governments around California and cities. That passive mode has created even greater risk and issue than if they would have actively tried to pursue it. To your point, even if the housing or whatever doesn't quite fit yet, how do we make it work the best? Because pivoting that way is probably a higher level of success than just doing the let's talk about it for 5-year government way of typically going about various things, including economic development.
Chris Rico over at Solano EDC, who probably started maybe 6 to 9 months before you, he was on the podcast back in May or June. He was talking about a vision for the two cities, Suisun and Fairfield, and the need to create it. You talked about the redlining, the highway, and the train stations to make it so both cities are walkable. People can have two different vibes and feel. Talk about where his vision may differ, how his organization can help you, and how you can partner with Fairfield on this vision.
As government, we also can't be protectionist. David Gasaway and I have had some great conversations around the fact that we protect the values of our individual cities and businesses we can get and all these things. But ultimately for us, because we're so interconnected geographically, and frankly, a lot of our population is intertwined throughout the day, it actually benefits us, to Chris Rico's point with the study he's looking at. How do we create this almost walkable downtown Fairfield into the walkable downtown Suisun? Ultimately, if we can do that, it isn't about competing at which businesses are where, but ultimately we're both going to win in that circumstance, right? It may mean they end up with business A because it makes more sense there and business B makes more sense here. We have to think about it in that regional approach of how we look at economic development, because that spillover will always benefit each other. Sometimes you get cities that get in this protection mindset of, no, I want Trader Joe's in Vacaville or Dixon, and I'm taking it from Fairfield. To me, that's the wrong mindset. Instead of having me take a piece of David's pie, David, how do we just grow the pie collectively together? Because then I don't care, right? And if that auto mall and Mercedes is better to be with you, then great, I'll go get a Hyundai one because it fits better for Suisun, or whatever the logic is for whatever business. Thinking about it in that way, from an adjacency standpoint, makes a lot better sense economically than just trying to fight each other, right? Governments have this tendency to get in this territorial battle. You see it with counties versus cities. You see it city versus city. The minute those things happen, innovation stops collectively. You get in these tug of wars that last forever. It becomes terrible. Who doesn't benefit is all the community members. They're the ones that don't realize the opportunity cost that have gone fleeting by because of this internal squabble of government bureaucracy and territorialism. That David and I have a similar mindset. He's a go-getter too. How can we build Fairfield? How can we build Suisun? And how the two merge together to make this work? Because ultimately we're both going to win. It doesn't need to be one taking over the other, one being better than the other. No, we're gonna rising tides all boat this together. That's where I think Chris Rico sits, right? That's his charge to figure out how we best can do that together. I think this priority study area he's looking at, development, where it can intersect, those are the things that will allow us to see that vision of how to make that happen. To me, how it should work everywhere, from county to cities and cities to cities, is we got to stop the territorialism. That is in Solano County specific. I'm talking just statewide. I think we would all be in a better place. When the bureaucracy gets to that level, game over, nothing's happening of any means for anybody.
We talk about this for economic development people. If you all go to the same GoBiz conference and similar conferences to recruit new businesses, you're all at the same conference competing against each other. If Fairfield brings in a new employer that has 2,000 new jobs that pay $150,000 on average, it benefits the whole community.
Yep.
People are going to live in Suisun and go to your cool entertainment district because it's going to be much cooler, but he's going to get the big box store.
Yes.
And when you have that mentality, you see it in the Tri-Valley area. They work a lot better together than the cities on the north side of that 680 corridor.
Yes.
I'm reminded with your big pie example of the movie Secret of My Success, where the other guys were gonna take over the Primrose corporations. They were cutting their expenses, but Michael J. Fox came along and said, let's grow the whole pie. Let's make this so valuable that nobody can buy us out because people want to keep their shares. And it's grow that pie example that I'm trying to illustrate for everybody else. Now, you've done this in Suisun City that has had a little tax base and has had some financial budgeting problems over the last couple of years. Talk a little bit about the problems of Suisun and that budget, and what do you think has led up to that in the past 20 years?
I think this goes back to the early 90s when we relied heavily on redevelopment. I think a lot of cities did this, but when you're small and you throw your eggs in all of those baskets that happen, and no one assumed in 2012 that was going to be taken away. But because of that, when that rug was removed, all of our ability to grow our tax base, including our property values, halted because Plan B wasn't sitting over here for us to think about, hey, what if redevelopment goes away? Many reasons why some of the biggest businesses in our world are great is not because of how they were first movers. It's how they've reacted as the business has changed on them, and they've been able to do it quickly. Think of Facebook. Everyone thinks of Facebook as the great behemoth it is today. I don't think many people understand the pivotal point for that company was when they moved from desktop to mobile at such a quick and seamless rate that they took over everything from that point on. The same goes for cities. We had redevelopment. We were starting to hum along, creating that foundation I mentioned, but no one thought, hey, if this goes away, what's the plan? And then when it happened, that was the beginning of the end. The history of how we got here, right? When I talked about creating a more depressed economy, we didn't have that driver anymore to get us out of it. We passed a tax measure in 2016. We'll be okay for a minute, but we didn't really think how that's going to last for a decade. We're going back down 2019. Let's try to put it back on the ballot. Politics got in the way, didn't even get to the ballot. They voted it down at the dais. Now we're diving even further down. It becomes these panic, fight or flight modes. And what I've told the council is I want to create this constant rising tide that goes slowly up. It'll accelerate fast in the beginning, but then continues to do this. So we are resilient. I talk about it as a resiliency plan, and it's a resiliency plan on the types of businesses we would bring here, the ability to go through different economic cycles, but from a governmental standpoint, the resiliency to have efficiency and cost structure awareness to know this is the level we need to be able to sift through some of those downtimes where they're more like speed bumps and not dives. For an example, we average about $843 of tax dollars, property sales, TOT, all of it together per resident of a city of 30,000 people. It's typical cities, and I'll point to Benicia just because it's in Solano County. They're almost $1,500 a person. Yes, the property values are different. That's partially because they've developed better, but that is a Grand Canyon level chasm to try to operate the same type of city for almost half the amount of money. Our general fund's about 26 million. Theirs is 56 million, right? And so if they're having some financial troubles at 56 million with a 30,000 resident community in a marina, what do you think I'm having with 26 million? It's a big problem. And people are like, well, what makes that change? Economic development starts with policing, believe it or not. It truly does. And I don't mean like hardcore military policing, community-based policing, where you have enough officers to ensure you have traffic officers, you have the right detectives to close cases, you have people patrolling around the streets, because when that level happens, the reason why they fixed Harlem is because of policing, started with policing, and then developers went, okay, we're ready, here we come. You build the campus, they're coming, right? Because it's money. Part of our struggle is we have 26 officers, but if you take out the chief and the commanders, you have 23 for a population of 30,000. We should have 1 to 1,000. We're already 7 officers short. You add in the typical 10% of injury and other things you have off in a year for the work they do. We have about 20 officers on a given time frame in our FTE, which means I have most of the time 2 officers and a sergeant on every shift to operate a 30,000 community city. We have a domestic violence call that's mandated 2 people to separate the parties. I have 1 sergeant roaming around the city day or night having to police what goes on. That's not sustainable for our community. to get where we need to. When we talk about tax revenue, it's not so I can have a higher salary as a city manager or have a whatever you want to think of that you don't want your government officials to have. It's to put real foundational services in here so I can lift that part of the community up to then lift everything else up from the economic development standpoint.
You referenced Harlem. I think it could be pointed to the areas of Detroit that have revived.
Yeah.
There's a lot of politics going on, and now Detroit is a punching bag. But there are good pockets of downtown Detroit that had been rebuilt and attracted a younger population from Generation Z to move into condos and apartments because they started feeling safe and wanted that vibe and that entertainment of the city. It tied together with development from the Pistons basketball club and entertainment facilities there. That's Oakland's biggest problem, right?
Yes.
Why are all the companies pulling out of Oakland? Because their employees don't feel safe. They don't want to park there. They don't want to go anywhere for lunch. That's a safety problem.
Absolutely. Until it gets bad, many community members don't even know it's a problem, right? Members of a family might be working or their kids got a lot of activities. And generally that's a slow burn to bad, right? And I'll tell you in Suisun, God love the men and women that do this for us because they aren't at the levels they need to be, right? And so it is exhausting for them. Fire is very similar to us. We're in very similar staffing issues. It's real exhaustion that these men and women have working the amount of overtime to try to keep these shifts at a safe level for them to even generally function. But the community, when that's done well, doesn't see it until that dam breaks. And that's my hometown of Vallejo. Unfortunately, when that dam breaks, it breaks real bad. And that's a hard line to get back, right? Because you create a culture and an atmosphere, much like Oakland, where that's not going to flip around in a year or two. We're talking 10 years for that to really functionally get to a place where people are going to feel back to safe and that the culture's changed. So I don't have 10 years to do this in Suisun. I don't have enough runway to operate the government in a good way. That's part of the expediency. That's why we talk about Measure S passing or tax measure. It's simply to get my head enough above water to be able to go warp speed at this other stuff for the community. It's not solving the problem. And I think before we touted these things in Suisun as saying they were going to solve the problem, instead of being clear with the community, no, this is one leg of the stool. And we got a bunch of other legs we got to do, but we need you to pass this one leg, or I can't even get to leg 2 of that stool to try to get us lifted up. We've tried to be honest with the community about that. We need this to maintain and slightly grow certain services for you around public safety mostly, to be able to build that foundation so I can overlay with the council all these other great things and give us enough runway. Because frankly, if it fails, I probably have a good 1.5 to 2 years before I have to make cuts that are very difficult to come back from as a community. And that's part of the draw that brought me here is I can help this community save itself. And not that I'm the be all end all. I saw the energy at council. I knew I had a newer department head crew that would culturally come with me. And I've been blessed to say 7 months in, absolutely have seen that. And frankly, breaking your leg a month into your job starts to show you how quickly these people will come for you and help you, because I had to, run a city from my couch, only coming in for very big meetings where I could hobble in. And these department heads stood up and did the things they needed to do and saw the vision. And I'm proud of them for it, because that's not easy with a boss you've had for 45 days to have that belief and trust. They've ran with it from the police chief to every position in my executive team.
And you're back to going off the ski jump this season?
Yeah, Brett will never be allowed to do any of that, according to his wife and daughter, ever again. Yeah, he sealed his fate on all those type of things, which is okay. I probably should stick to a golf course where I'm much more suited to hit a shot and enjoy a Bloody Mary along the way. I didn't tell my wife that I was going on a hike. I just told her I was going on a jog, and I went on my own, and I had 10% of my cell phone left when it ended up happening. So needless to say, I did not get the most loving result once she felt I was fine, okay, safe, and in the ambulance. There was a little frustration for her and my daughter about the thought process of their dad and husband going to do that.
I want to hit on Vallejo for a minute. You talked about it going, the dam broke. There's a lot of complaints that one guy owns way too much of the downtown real estate. He's aging. It has that. Talk a little bit about, how do you see, there's a new mayor coming in, but we've had new mayors in the past that have talked about fixing Vallejo. What needs to happen in that city from your perspective as somebody who cares about it?
Yeah.
To make this major shift that you're hoping to make in Suisun?
Yeah, they have to get the police department in a way that can be used to address the crime, specifically around downtown, because I see downtown as one of those amazing redevelopment areas that the right 2 or 3 massive developers could do an amazing. Victorians down there could be refurbished to bring in a San Francisco kind of vibe. You have areas that we're connected to the waterfront that is underutilized. The reason why policing is so important is because anyone that's lived in Vallejo understands the crest, right? It's a very crime-ridden area of Vallejo, but it seeds into the entire downtown. And I think you need the police to be able to attack prostitution, drugs, and that level of crime at a very intense level, partnering with the city manager and the council. Because once you start cleaning it up, then you look at using things like eminent domain or seizures to basically say, we're not having this anymore. And when you do that, you're creating an expectation in the community that this is no longer to be tolerated. Now, the problem with that is that comes with a lot of difficulty as you're doing it. It creates negative police interactions with the criminal element. I think you're going to put real people's lives in danger going after crime in this way in a community that's been embedded with it for so long. But I think until you do that, why would I put $100 million development downtown if that isn't completely right? There's no way. You're never going to move. You will bounce the needle back and forth, but you will never get to a place where you can see a true revitalization, in my opinion, until you deal with the policing and the crime. And that's going to cost you a lot of money to do it, because you got to get the right chief and an executive team and officer culture there. You got to get cops that want to police and not mercenaries to do it. And look, my dad was in public safety. I'm the outlier in my family. Most of them were, whether it's fire or police. I have the utmost respect for that world, but you got to get the right set of culture and cops in there. And they have not been able to find that magic yet. And until they do, I don't care what else they talk about. It's never going to come off the ground until that problem is solved.
That goes for Antioch, another city that's having a similar police force issue as Oakland and Bart.
And it seems so simple when you say it out loud, right? Okay, you pointed at it. What's the problem? We identified the issue. Solving that problem with the culture change and the cost of getting the right type of police officers there and executive team to do it, that's where it gets really difficult, right? You have a city that doesn't quite have the revenue base, even though it's big, to do it. It's almost like you're going to have to invest in other areas of your community today to let that get to a point that will allow everything else to grow after it. But that's a risk, right? That's a high risk to take for somebody, whether it's an elected official, a city manager, or they have a brand new one there kind of for Pinole. That's a lot to absorb as a city manager on your first months on the job. But I think it's the only way that all those communities you mentioned, including my own, gets to a point where we can freely say we're open for business in a real way to developers. It's why I believe in looking at a dedicated public safety tax of some sort. So you almost can guarantee through the public vote, certain revenue dollars have to go towards that, right? Mandated, take all the politicalness out of it. Nope, by law, you voted at 67%. This is where this pot of money is going to go to help fund that in a real way. Almost take it out of the politicians' hands. We know this is important and how we're going to fund it as a community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Part of this goes back to what you started with. This is having leadership and a vision to go do things. You can't do these in elements by themselves. They all have to go together, like the city council and the department heads and the city manager. You have to have this vision where all these elements, from public safety to economic development, go together in here. And this will appear after the election. Let's say your Measure S has hopefully passed for you. What is the first thing that is getting done as that revenue starts to come in? And what do you need most in 2025 to launch in this direction?
So the first thing is, if it passes, because every single one of my union has been out there pounding the table, walking streets, knocking on doors, doing what they're doing. The first thing I need to do, and we'll be in contract negotiations in the spring, is to provide a little bit of that thank you carrot to them. We see the effort you're putting in. We know your wages in Suisun are still the lowest in the county. Give them a little bit of that. It's not the thing that will make the day, but enough to show, hey, you backed us, we're going to back you. And then from a staffing perspective, it truly becomes a public safety ad. How do I add police and fire, specifically in police, to start to get the levels we talked about up immediately with these dollars, right? And it's not that every dollar of the 2.8 million more we would get initially from Measure S in year one, it's not that all of that has to go there, but I got to start making headway on both salaries and bodies in both those public safety areas to lift up that part of the communities we talked about, knowing to the rest of the community that I'm not forgetting about you. It's just a priority and an order of operation like we talked about. Trust me, the whole vision's there, but if I don't start here, this is never going to happen over here. It's really being focused on that mindset and getting the culture, everybody that doesn't try to just all get theirs at one time, but understand I believe in the city manager and the city council enough that this initial foray into increasing public safety is a means to an end. And we're going to trust that when they do this and this thing starts to get good, that we're all going to benefit in the end and rise up for the long haul of this community. And I think that's what we're going to hold to and stick to, because that's what we see from a vision standpoint of how we make that economic development plan work. Now, separate from that, we are going to engage in January when our Cosmont study goes public and is adopted by the council. We are going to hit the ground running with development people, whether that's Lewis Builders, whether that's whoever big developer you can think of, to talk about master development possibilities and see who wants to do this vision with us here. We'll make it as easy as we can with that partner that we ultimately agree to be with, but we want to let everyone know Suisun is ready for business. We're here. Here's the vision. How do you make that happen, including City Hall? Part of my plan right now is how do I get out of City Hall? Because my civic center, my City Hall, and my police department are on waterfront property. My view right now is pretty darn nice at all the boats in the marina that are driving by, but I shouldn't have that view as a city manager. I should be in some nondescript building in the middle of the city that's still inviting to the community, but not down here on probably $4.5 million of land value and God knows how much revenue between business and hotel or whatever you want to build on this thing. It's okay. We're going to do that. And we're going to try to do that as fast as we can. Could you imagine developing from literally where I sit all the way to the end of Civic Center along the water? That could be a pretty cool, walkable, waterfront, mixed use kind of start of this evolution we're talking about. And so that's the development partners we're looking for, who can deliver that as high quality and as fast as we can, knowing that Suisun cares about the money it gets in the sale of its assets, but cares more about the product you deliver for the long haul, the benefit that provides our community in the future. And it's not about, can I sell this property for $7 million instead of $5 million? It's, can I sell this to someone for a reasonable amount of money that's going to deliver quickly and a good product? That's really what we care about. And so that's the January go date where Jim Bermuda's the development director and I are going to be hip together, conjoined twins almost, to try to make this happen. And that's where my focus is going to be. And why I appreciate my department heads as well is operationally, I'm very aware, but I don't have to be anywhere near managing them. They do their job day to day, which lets me do my job the way I need it. In a city where I don't have an assistant city manager, if I have to turn inward all the time, doesn't mean I don't pay attention to it, but I have to be deep into operations all the time. Then I can't do all this stuff with the council to make these other things happen. That's when it falls down. I need them to do this, and they are doing it. I applaud them for holding on to that piece, which lets me be the accelerator down the line that I need to be as the city manager. I'm very blessed in that, honestly, because I know that's not the case for every city manager. I applaud the men and women that work for me in that way. And I think the community really needs to know, and I try to highlight every time I can, we're lucky that they're doing what they're doing.
I just love the energy and the vision. Most cities don't have this level of vision. And I could just feel sitting here, your energy, your vibe, and desire to be successful in this. So I wish you the best in that. And thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Asch, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.